Welcome, the Monarchist Minute. I'm your host, William Stout, here with Frederick and Watercube. How are y'all doing this evening?
I'm wonderful.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Doing great for now.
Glad to hear it. You guys staying cool on this Saturday evening? I know it's hot in Ohio right now.
It's a nice 88 degrees outside right now.
We got above 90 today.
It's a little bit hot out here.
Is it muggy in Ohio? Like, I remember one time I went through Ohio, everything felt sticky.
It's very muggy in Ohio.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's muggy
Yeah,
down
it's like
here
a
too, but
swamp
like,
environment down
you
there.
guys are inland, so you guys don't deserve to be muggy. You know what I mean?
We're not as inland as most people think, considering if we consider the Great Lakes to be a major body of water.
But like, do the Great Lakes generate that much humidity?
You'd be surprised.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, my brother's up in Cleveland, and whenever I went to visit him, it was muggy as hell up there.
Albeit that Lake Erie is actually the shallowest of the Great Lakes. It's at its most 60 feet deep.
Okay.
Which sounds like a lot, but relatively speaking, it's not. I mean,
Yeah, that's shallow as hell.
Yeah. Lake Superior goes down a few hundred feet. In fact, I think Lake Superior dips at its lowest point, dips below sea level.
And the Chesapeake Bay is like 174 feet.
You know, it's weird because Lake Erie is so shallow, but then you get into Lake Ontario, which is further down the what's it called, watershed, and it gets deep again.
I wonder why that is, geology-wise.
I think it has to do with the fact that Lake Erie is the most southern of the lakes.
Yeah,
and therefore, when the lakes were carved by the glaciers were weakest there because they were the furthest south. And therefore had the warmest temperatures.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I'm pulling that out of my ass, to be honest.
It's you're using the knowledge you have to try to make some conclusion, which is most of humanity's existence, let's be real.
Yeah. One of the interesting things is that the till line is still very, very prevalent in Ohio geology. Because where the continental divide is, like where the rivers that flow north in the areas and the rivers that flow south into the Mississippi watershed is, there is a brief area of hills that cover that entire area where the till line was. So it's still geographically noticeable as a small bit of upland that just covers the whole northern rim of the state.
Okay. Like, I'm still shocked that it's like more shallow than the Chesapeake Bay, which I've always kind of viewed as a shallow bay.
No, Lake Erie is shallow as fuck.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
The reason why we can't get bigger shipping into the Great Lakes because any larger ships would probably get swamped in the bottom of Lake Erie.
Okay. Geology is fascinating. I love geography.
Geology and geography and everything fun in between. Now, one of the things I've done is I've taken a trip up to Minnesota to go to the Boundary Waters. Do you know what the Boundary Waters are?
That sounds familiar, but I don't think I know.
Okay, so the Boundary Waters are a chain of glacial lakes left over from the last ice age that sit directly on the Canadian and U.S. border in upper Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
They feed directly into the Lake Superior, and this is called a wilderness area. And a wilderness area is a step up from a national park where people are not allowed to be in the wilderness area above a certain amount in groups a certain size. Like, we weren't allowed more than 9 people to a group when we were there.
Okay.
And so we took our canoes out and we did a 50-mile round trip over a course of a week in canoes.
Well, that sounds nice.
Seems like fun.
It was beautiful. I would love to do the trip again. It was a stunning trip and a wonderful way to see nature.
One thing I always wanted to do was boat down the James River, like canoe down it down to where I am.
I don't know what a James River is.
It's basically, it runs from like the 757 region, which is my region, up to Richmond and a bit more inland. It's one of the 4 major rivers of Virginia. It's the James, Thames. It's all the British rivers, the Potomac as well. I should have these memorized, but I only think of the James River because there's a really garbage bridge to get like from the peninsula onto the mainland or the rest of Virginia, and I hate that bridge, and it's the James River Bridge.
Two of the most important rivers actually make their headwaters in my county, that being the Scioto and the Olentangy.
You could be living that like what's his name? Not Tom Sawyer. Huckleberry Finn life, just coasting down a river.
They're a little shallow up at this part. They get deep fast, but they're a little shallow up where I am.
Okay.
That's primarily because we drained all the swamps that fed them in order to make farmland, but there are still some wetlands out there. In fact, half my town was built on top of a swamp, and still to this day, if it rains hard enough, that part of town floods.
I'm going to put in the Stages text chat the Virginia rivers, just for some sense of scale.
I should probably do the same for Ohio rivers. Give me a moment. Ohio
I do like how they're just
River
British
map.
rivers, except like it's like the James, York, Rappahannock, and then Potomac.
Is it supposed to be pronounced Potomac or Potomac?
I've always heard it pronounced Potomac. Like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like Ohio is one of those river states. It's like Minnesota being a lake state.
Yes, we have rivers everywhere, and the big rivers do the little rivers no justice. A lot of them have been culverted over, but there's still like little tiny streams just all over the place. But I live in Marion County here. You can see it just above Franklin County, where Columbus is. Next county up is Delaware, and you can see we have the Scioto and the Olentangy, which both sort of make their headwaters up here.
Okay.
And then they move south through the county. Although, as you can see, the Scioto kind of hangs further west. It's mainly a small stream over there.
I'm trying to find it on the map. So it's towards the west?
Yeah. So, there in the western part of my county, there's a lot of low-lying marshlands that feed into the Scioto. So the Scioto gets significantly bigger when it goes through my county.
That's the same with the James. The James just feeds into the giant swamp that is the Hampton Roads region. Which, like, God bless the James River. Without it, we wouldn't be producing aircraft carriers down here, and this city would just be dead.
In Ohio, excuse me for a moment. I gotta turn on the light. I'll be right back in a moment.
Yeah, I kind of look like I'm in a jail cell right now.
No, you look like you're the nostalgia critic.
You do. You kind of do.
You got that the off-white background where it's like, "Hello, I'm the nostalgia critic. I remembered, so you don't have to." Today we're watching Fall of the Eagles.
Oh, hi, Joe. How are you, Joe?
Doing fine. I'm just sweating my derriere off.
Oh,
Californian.
California. I can't imagine it's fun right now.
It definitely ain't.
Come over here, kitty. I want to show you on camera.
Waterkeep is showing off his cat.
Like, look at this guy. Look at this guy.
Look that's a little kitty.
Yeah, by the way.
But
did you know black cats can give you bad luck?
He's not a black cat. He's gray because he's a wedgie.
Oh, gray?
Yeah, he's a wedgie, which is like this Norwegian
Well, I guess
forest cat.
the dark really covers up the gray, making him black.
Has poor lighting right now. That's the problem.
Here, let me just take this really shitty lamp and point it at my cat. He's not happy. He's not a happy camper. Okay, you want to be free? Yeah, you want to go munch? Yeah, your food's over there. Go eat. Go eat, you stupid creature.
Don't call your cat stupid.
My other cat's staring at him. He wants to beef. Well, she wants to beef with him. Don't beef with him. Don't. Yeah.
Got a cat fight in the chat, everyone. Cat fight in the chat.
My cat knocked there's this little bit on my headset where my cat knocked it, so I wasn't able to hear you guys. I was like, why is no one talking?
But aside from weather, anything going on as of late?
Not really.
Well, I know we have a presidential debate coming up next week.
Oh, can't wait to see two old people duke it out. Woo!
That will
Yeah.
definitely be.
See three of that one candidate that everybody says won't be there.
You know, they're
shoot.
never going to include a third party or an independent because, like, why would they? That gives legitimacy to them. Like, it's kind of like Jill
they
Stein
did
showing
back
up at the
in
debate.
Old days.
I won
People are
RS.
saying they should let Kennedy up there.
They should let
Yeah.
Kennedy, Stein, and whoever the libertarian candidate is up there. So it's just like this brawl.
You mean the leftist libertarian candidate up there?
Did they choose a left one? Like knowing how the Libertarian Party is developing and how it's splitting down the center with like the northeastern Libertarian parties taking a lot more of a like I don't know like how to describe them. Like I know the Libertarians up in New England have a Nazi problem, and the ones everywhere else are trying to like fight against the Nazi problem that is like the New England chapters.
Well, I know New Hampshire is like violently separatist for some godforsaken reason. I don't know why.
Oh, I can get into that a little bit. Like a lot of what happened with like the New England libertarian parties was that first there was the Vermont and New Hampshire initiatives where a bunch of libertarians were like, why don't we all just move to Vermont and New Hampshire to, make a libertarian state? It's kind of like the same thing as the Pacific Northwest initiative with the Nazis where they were all like, let's move to Idaho, Montana, parts of eastern Washington and Oregon. Same logic, but what ended up happening is wait, what?
Yeah, well, that failed miserably because we don't see any libertarian states or any extremist states.
Yeah, well, we technically do with Idaho. Like, there's a whole the reason why Ruby Ridge went down was because of Aryan nations, because like Ruby Ridge was an Aryan nations associated compound. But like what ended up happening with these libertarian parties is libertarians are the Nazis' delight to radicalize because a lot of the times like libertarians aren't good at fighting off infiltrators, and Nazis
the
will
authoritarian right taking over libertarian right parties.
Like, it's also because a lot of the times the libertarian right people, they want to just have a private dictatorship under capitalism where they get to be like the little corporate warlord. It's why ANCAPs can slowly evolve into like pseudo-fascist. It's very common.
Well, I always said that anarcho-capitalism is just neo-feudalism light.
It is.
That is true.
You inevitably devolve into a super hyper decentralized state based off of various factions with overlapping authority over areas.
Yeah, like
ANCAPs will probably not work in the long run.
Like
They
looks like
say
Snow
it will,
Crash.
but it won't. It'll evolve to being like one region becomes like part of like a corporation or whatever. It's like
You see, the problem with anarchism in general is that, like it or not, human beings tend to be hierarchical by nature. So if we create an intentional vacuum of power, something will eventually fill its place out of necessity.
Yeah, like
even in an anarcho-communist society, there's going to eventually need to be a state because there needs to be someone to enforce egalitarianism.
Here's their cope for that, though, is that, we're just against unjustified hierarchies, which means really nothing. And, like, it feels weird to, like, well, not weird, but, like, bad to punch down on the anarchists, because they don't really have arguments to begin with. Like, they just struggle with theory.
That just makes them better to punch down against, because they can't really defend themselves.
Okay, here's the thing, though. At least they have some good writers. They got Dostoevsky, they got Kropotkin. Kropotkin's a good writer, even if you disagree with his theory.
Anarchists do make good artists, I will admit that. But you can't run a country with good literature and painting.
The futurists would disagree with you.
Run a country without a state, and that's...
Yeah, you can. You just need the anarcho cops with the anarcho labor camps and the anarcho prisons, just like the CNTFAI did.
No.
Wait, what is that acronym?
Like,
You
if
cannot
you've seen
mention
in
that
history,
The,
people generally go towards a centralized state.
the CNTFAI, William, it was the organization inside of Spain during the Spanish Civil War that took over Catalonia, and they were nominally anarcho-syndicalist.
Yeah, it only lasted 3 weeks.
The CNTFAI lasted a fair bit longer than that, I'm pretty sure.
Maybe.
Because it was like a long-standing, slowly co-opting parts of the Spanish Republic over time.
You know,
Like,
I
Yeah,
also
and-
like how there is a direct correlation between Catalonian separatism and the aftermath of the Spanish Civil War, with most of the Catalonian separatists directly resulting from former Spanish republicanism.
well, it's
And
like
having-
they had their independence technically under the CNTFAI, which controlled most of Catalonia and Aragon for its very brief existence. Like, it was able. It's revolutionary Catalonia is fascinating to look into because it was basically they basically had to redo democratic confederalism or kind of invent democratic confederalism because anarchism just doesn't work. And it's why the post-anarchists are right
Yeah, that's
comparatively.
why anarchism is very vague. Very vague.
The funniest thing is with the anarcho-syndicalist movement, especially with how the Spanish, French, and Italian ones played into each other, like the Italian and French ones literally just became fascists. Like there was an anarcho-syndicalist in the Vichy cabinet.
yeah, I just like
course,
noticing
Just
how
had different types of syndicalism, like revolutionary syndicalism, national syndicalism.
Okay, national syndicalism, like honestly, which is just what Jose Antonio de Primavera called his like fascism to try to sell it better. It wasn't really even a national syndicalism. It didn't really take much from like Sorel. It didn't really. It was just trying to put a new coat of paint over corporatism, while most
and quite literally, Sorel said that that the Soviet Union was the fucking syndicalist state.
it's because Sorel was smoking something else. Like I haven't read Reflections on Violence. I haven't read anything by Sorel, but like he was doing something.
He went from like left wing to like, okay, we gotta take a look at it from like a right wing perspective.
It wasn't even a shift to right. It was because his development with fascism and it was less of a right reaction, more just like this weird melding of ideas, because there wasn't really that much of it when it came down to extremists, a left-right divide, because they were both reacting to liberal capitalism. So they were able to find common ground in reacting to liberal capitalism.
I still like to laugh at the idea of national syndicalism because a former member of the MOA who was disgraced and thrown out in He Who Shall Not Be Named unironically calls himself a national syndicalist.
Me when the National Union tries to send me to war.
Yeah.
It's just it's wild. Like most of like the syndicalists now, like the only major syndicalist movement, at least here in the United States, I think, is the IWW, and that's the IWW. Which,
yeah, that's like the
That is
lefty.
the International Workers. I forget what the last W stands for.
no, it's Industrial Workers of the World.
That's right. They help people make unions, and I had a friend suggest to me that if I ever want to unionize, go through them and not through the government-sponsored organizations.
Here's the thing: like the IWW is useful as a union if your workplace doesn't have a union and you want to just be able to say, "Hey, I'll contact my union rep if you keep me for extra hours or whatever." Because like I had a friend who's a government contractor, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'll contact my union." And since no one else was unionized, the dude was just let off home, even though like the IWW. Even if you needed them, they wouldn't be able to do anything for you because they're poor. They also have so many internal issues. Like another friend.
They have like so many different factions. Like they have communists, they got socialists.
It's less that.
Syndicalists.
It's way less that, because like if it was an ideological split, that would at least be interesting. Most of the time, it's like internal scandal because anarchists suck at handling scandal, especially when it comes down to sex pests. Like a friend of mine went to an IWW meeting and they spent like the first 30 minutes talking about, hey, there's this guy who's like sexually harassed someone at one of our former meetings. What do we do about him? And they spent the entire time debating over him when the guy showed up to ask for resources on how to unionize his workplace. Like, it's just but that's also kind of true with most radical politics, though, is that they kind of suck at kicking out problematic members.
Yes, they want to solve their problems democratically, even though it's not working well for them.
It's not even democratically, because, like, here's the thing. If it was democratic, they'd at least take a vote. They never take a vote. It's all about the discussion. You discuss, but you don't take action because action is scary.
Then vote,
It is the committee on committees all over again.
It literally is. It always comes down to that because everyone wants their voice heard. Everyone wants to be considered when it comes down to the discussion. And it just doesn't work out because people don't want to actually like have that
You know, if I keep sitting on this, when I finally stand up after this podcast, I'm gonna fall flat on my ass.
Yeah, I'm not touching that.
It's very
Never
good
will.
though. Despite the fact that it's 40 proof, it's actually not that strong.
Oh no.
Like, I thought we would have a topic for this episode, but instead we're just talking about random stuff.
I mean,
Hey.
topic.
There is a topic. Yeah,
There's
like,
always a topic to
It's
cover.
esoteric nonsense, as usual.
but like a lot of the time, like, well, this is just a truth for most political movements, most movements in general. People don't want to take responsibility, show agency, or do their job inside an organization because that means they actually have to have people look at what they did and judge them for that. People don't like living with decision making, and it's also why a lot of these overly democratic organizations tend to fall in on themselves. It's why like the Democrats and the Republicans tend to operate fairly well, is because they're internally oftentimes more authoritarian than they are democratic.
Yeah, and I've noticed this, and I've said this a lot about democratic systems, and in fact, I think I might write an article for my Substack about this, is that the most successful democratic societies and institutions have inherently undemocratic functions or offices to enforce order in the democratic society. Like in Germany, how Germany has a special police unit or investigative unit that polices and suppresses political extremists, or like how the U.S. has the Supreme Court, which is an unelected body that oftentimes legislates without oversight or being able to stop.
Oh yeah, and also Congress is the one that picks it. So
well, it's presidential appointee then approved by Congress.
Right.
Yeah.
Specifically the Senate. I don't think the House has say. If I remember.
Yeah, the House isn't important. They're just stupid. They're Plimbo. They're
yeah,
out
they're
in 2
just
years.
there. They're just there for whatever.
Honestly,
Yeah, the House of the people.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem with the House of
Yeah.
Representatives, in my opinion at least, is that the House of Representatives, their terms are too short. That, I think, is the biggest problem. It's very hard to get things done in 2 years if you're doing politics. I think the House term should be at least 5 years like British Parliament.
I think the biggest issue with the House is how small the House is. Like, the House could be... Like, I agree with Robert Reich's kind of analysis where it should be just expanded. So they're... Like, because it used to be, like, what, 100,000 people per representative? And now it's, like, a lot more.
Yeah, there needs to be some reform.
700,000?
Like,
I think there should be one. We've had this conversation in the council before, and this is part of our package of reforms beside monarchy. Those reforms that we want to push on the U.S. besides turning it into a monarchy. One of them is we want instead of having a hard cap on how many seats in the House there can be, we want to set the number of seats in the House to be proportional to the population by saying that there should be one seat in the House per 500,000 U.S. citizens.
I think it should be less than that. I think it should be 100,000 because realistically, the whole point of the House of Representatives is to be that interface. Like the Senate used to be appointed by the state. I think it should still be appointed by the state. The
And
House
we
of
do
Yeah, same
too.
here. Ditto.
Yeah,
Ditto.
like the House of
Mhm.
Representatives is supposed to be that communication between the people and the government. It's supposed to be that interface. It's supposed to represent compared to represent state interest.
Well, not
Mm.
gonna lie, a lot of the stuff that's passed through the Senate is not really supported by the people, but
Well,
bunch
no,
of
the
like,
Senate's supposed to be authoritarian, while the House of Representatives is supposed to be democratic. It's supposed to be the checks inside the legislator.
Right, the Senate originally was supposed to be the interface between state governments and the federal government.
And by making it all democratic, it really just undermines the power of both. And also by limiting the House, it means that that interface between the population and the government is just heavily weakened. Like,
Yeah.
if you're able to at least like reach out to your representative and then like have FaceTime with them, even if when it's 100,000 people per representative, that's a lot more manageable to do than like
Right.
a representative like representing like what 700,000 people.
Yeah, my only concern then is that there might
And
then
growing,
be
too.
too many representatives.
If there's too many representatives, you know what that means? We just have more dynamic politics in the House, which
Yeah.
Yeah, we got more people
You
per
would-
representative if we have less people in the House.
like a third party might actually have a chance if they only have to convince 100
Maybe.
like 52% of
Maybe.
100,000 people to get an elected position.
Now, what are your thoughts on proportional representation? Like instead of basing representation off of districts, we like do a proportional system.
I think there's a value in
but
districting because it keeps issues
Left
local.
break.
Right,
Right,
right.
like because like a representative is supposed to represent one region from a state compared to representing like just a proportional part of the entire state itself. But I also am for ranked choice voting when it comes down to electing the House as well.
I
That's it.
support ranked choice too.
Oh, imagine
I
the
don't
nightmare
know.
that would be if we went to like a proportional representation system. Oh,
I don't know if you knew this, Water Cube, but I used to be in the Yang Gang back in the day before I fully devoted myself to monarchism.
Okay, I don't know. I don't mean this as an insult, but that tracks.
Wait,
That tracks.
What do you mean that tracks? No.
No, that without you more, that tracks. I'm sorry, but that tracks.
Can you explain why it tracks?
I don't know, just your vibes, your energy, like it tracks. I'm sorry.
Well, if it helps, I also went to school and I'm trained in robotics and automation. So that's the reason Yang appealed to me, is because being someone who was in the automation industry, I knew what he was talking about and I was informed about his points.
Mm-hmm.
And while my opinion has changed slightly from where I was at the Yang Gang, I've gotten a little more realist and less optimistic. I still hold a lot of his core tenets about how automation can be very, very disastrous if we don't legislate it and control the crisis as it's brought into fruition.
Like a lot of it is like, at least when it comes down to automation, it just comes down to the issues of we are no longer a country that produces anything. Like what limited stuff we do produce is just nothing compared to what we can import.
Basically, like people have moved away from like hard labor to like easy, like just wear a suit type stuff.
It's not about it being easy. It's about we're in the economic position as a world superpower to import things for a lot cheaper than we would be able to. Like, it's easier for me to import 500 bumper stickers from China, and that costs me about like what, $500, and compared to go to the local shop, it's gonna probably cost me for 500 around like $1,000 or even more than that, because just it's cheap.
As someone who works in a factory in a blue-collar job, this is very bad for American workers because the threat of deporting labor to another country really takes away from the bargaining power of the American worker.
And globalization is considered dirty, not like, this and that.
Globalization was the single greatest weapon against organized labor that the world had ever seen, and automation is going to trump globalization.
Oh, it's gonna replace a lot of stuff.
The issue is with globalization, it's like it comes down to the fact that America is like the global reserve currency as well. So it's going to be cheaper. Like even if, let's just say, America switches completely to automated, we're producing things again. It's all automated though, so it's kind of cheap to do. We'd still be importing most of our resources because it's just cheaper to get those. That's why we get blood diamonds from the Congo.
Right. But
and wait, does South Africa even do diamonds anymore, or is that just?
I think they still do diamonds to some degree, and I think they still do emeralds. I know that's how the Musk family got their fortune.
Right. But the main issue I see with automation in the future, and this actually goes into Hobbesian theory with me, is that capitalism is based off a social contract, or capitalist society, where you have the capitalist, the bourgeois class, and then you have the proletariats, and our society is based off a social contract where the bourgeois provide the capital to stimulate the economy and create labor, and the capitalists, the proletariats bargain for wages to provide their labor. So if automation takes over a majority of the jobs, the social contract breaks. Now, this means that capitalists, the bourgeois class, can no longer justify their control over the economic means of control over the means of production.
When people lose their grips on their job because they're getting replaced by a machine, then it's going to cause a bit of a problem.
This is actually one of the things that Marx kind of got into, where capitalism, it's why he was for free trade, is that capitalism will reach a point of efficiency where it makes itself outmoded. And that's kind of his whole sense of history, where the previous system reaches a peak of efficiency and has to be replaced with a newer system that can reach a higher point of efficiency.
Right. But after we reach that point, I see two possible problems. One being what I call the Rose Garden theory, which is based off of the whole image of the Palace of Versailles, and that the idea is that if far too many people are living in the Rose Garden and there's not enough people maintaining the Rose Garden, and the Rose Garden won't sustain itself and will inevitably collapse.
Yeah.
Unless automation is doing all of the work, then there's basically
automation will stave this off, or at least buy us time. But the second problem is with automation, most of the world will probably start to trend toward being a first world Western country. And this leads into a second problem, that the world cannot sustain that level of consumption. So then the second crisis we would then run into is a crisis of consumption, where our decadence as the human race will outpace Earth's ability to sustain us, and we will literally basically wastefully starve.
When you have complete automation, it'll completely screw up a lot of economies, because they can't really keep up with a lot of stuff.
The issue with the overconsumption thing is that the first world, it overconsumes, yet it underconsumes at the exact same time. Oftentimes, this goes back to a little bit with what I've been thinking about with George Patay, is one of his arguments was that the bourgeois are the ones that tend to overconsume. They're the ones that cause all the burning. We'll probably see that happen in most of what's now perceived as the third world, but we're still going to see a lot of people who are, especially as they get replaced by automatons, basically, and there's no real social safety net for them, living off of next to nothing.
If I may interject, that's what I was saying when it comes to the social contract breaking. If we seize those means, then we reach that point of overconsumption, because then once we seize those means, we destroy the bourgeois, and when everyone lives like the bourgeois, we inevitably reach that point of overconsumption.
I don't think everyone will ever really live like how the bourgeois live, though, even when we reach a pinnacle of automation, because because the bourgeois would want to maintain their class position, and a lot of that's done through the social aspects, by them being able to overconsume. And because they kind of view themselves as a new aristocracy, so they want to keep the poors out, so they'd rather use them as organ banks when their organs start to fail and just harvest them for that shit, or do whatever they would want with the proletariat as they get moved into the reserve army of labor.
You see, no, I don't think in the past maybe that wouldn't have been the case, but I think now the average human society as a global whole is far too materialistic.
Yeah.
When we reach that point, human beings are going to be so consumed by the amount of material wealth that will become available to them that they'll become gluttonous.
Like, I think the natural human ideation isn't gluttony, but it is sacrifice. Like, above all, it's like, I don't mean sacrifice just in the traditional way of like, oh, we'll do without because it's for the greater good, but it's more to waste that abundance on sacrifice. It's been something that's been prescient throughout most of human society. It's why the Aztecs would do human sacrifice. It's why most societies had some form of animal sacrifice. It's taking some level of excess and burning it without profit.
Again, that goes back into still waste. So I don't know. I find mankind to be inherently self-interested, and I feel like that's why capitalism works as well as it does, is because it appeals to mankind's innate sense of greed.
Like, I think it has to more do with, because each system somewhat primes psychology. Like, capitalism primes their psychology towards greed and towards that sublime object, which is currency. It's like something that we yearn for because it kind of resembles the optimal position in capitalism, which is having this essentially what's almost like is a god, which is currency. And if like we reach a point of optimization and the system I shouldn't say the word greed. Desire. Currency becomes an object of desire, and as soon as we reach a point of efficiency where everyone's able to have access to abundance, that desire will dissipate. The system will have essentially changed from capitalism to something else, or what we'll more likely see is capitalists pushing off against automation. It's like the stuff with the Amazon automated grocery stores with Whole Foods and that. Like, those were just literally like people in India working call centers.
Right.
Yeah, like literally you had to go through like, a checkout thing. The guy would actually do the stuff. But now it's like, do it yourself,
Well, it's less that, because like even like the automated ones, again with the Amazon example, like you would walk out and they would be like, "Oh yeah, we recorded all your food. There's a automated system that'll hand it for you." And it was literally some guy on a computer all the way in India, like processing your purchases for you because it was cheaper to employ human labor. Human life is always cheaper than machines, and we'll just use human life as a way to what's it called? Supplement machinery.
Here's the thing, though.
Well,
Machines
the thing I find as
you don't need to eat or sleep, and once everything's automated, that's when they can max out profit.
Well, it's like they can. Here's the thing: most of the capitalist mode of production has reached peak profitability. It's why now most of the American economy is financial capitalist, because it's easier to generate profit when you're just moving numbers around. Like, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Once you invent options trading, it's over for you as a society, because that's a way just to print money. Like, it's a way to gamble on the entire economy, and you don't need to do any labor for it or create anything, because financial capital doesn't like actually reward creation. It rewards playing the numbers.
What was I gonna say? I
trying to say something, but
Oh, go ahead, Frederick. Sorry.
Yeah, imagine if automation was to replace blue collar workers. It would cause like
as if I may, using my expertise as an industrial engineer. So you have this common misconception that technology creates jobs. It does not. Demand creates jobs. The idea that technology creates more work is completely anti-axiomatic to the purpose of technology. We create technology to make life easier. that means by nature we create technology to make less work.
Yeah, and sometimes when things get too easier, it could lead to harder times for other people because
Well,
It's
gentlemen, please allow me to finish.
Mhm.
So the problem is then, since technology creates less work, what happens is that we have an illusion in economic growth and creation of new jobs during the Industrial Revolution, not because of a technology creating new jobs, but because technology driving an increase in output and therefore driving an increase in demand. As things got cheaper due to supply and demand and new markets opened up, this creates more demand and that necessitates the need for more labor. However, the actual value of that labor is diminished because the amount of work required to produce a good. Let's take steel, for example. Let's use steel as an example. One worker in a steel mill produces more steel than a blacksmith ever could.
Yeah.
The only reason there are more people working in a steel mill than a blacksmith shop is because the steel mill needs to produce or produces at such a massively high capacity by comparison. But if we look at the amount of steel produced per employee, the amount of steel produced would be still several times higher than a blacksmith would ever be able to produce. So,
But-
in reality, what we're looking at is it's kind of like a Big Mac index, where we're looking at the production power per employee, per worker. So, while it looks like we have the illusion of there being more workers, the reality is each worker is displacing more of the previous archaic craftsmen whose labor was far more valuable and far more important than the blue-collar, unskilled laborer, because technology allows them to produce so much more for such less than the previous.
see technology as, taking away our jobs so we don't have
Right.
jobs anymore.
Exactly. Another excellent example of this is in the first industry that got automated, which is textiles. In that, the first industry that basically was chased out of business by industrialization were the cottage industries set up by women to produce cloth and textiles. It
Mhm.
used to be that all weaving, sewing, knitting, and production of yarn and cloth was done in the home, and there was entire cottage industries entirely controlled by women that ran these cottage industries out of their homes. These were the first industries to get automated away. And these women went from being self-reliant in their homes and basically having their own businesses where they had a monopoly on producing cloth, textiles, and clothing to basically either having to work for these factories and or being shelved into domestic chores. And this actually goes into an interesting fact where the idea of the single income household, the idea of the man being a breadwinner and the woman being basically a domestic servant, does not exist before industrialized society. Because in pre-industrial society, the family unit is in itself a business. Like in a farming family, everyone participates in farming, everyone participates in the business that is the farm. And so
Yeah,
everyone
Like
contributes to
the
the collective
Amish.
system. So the idea of there being a single income household only exists because of the Industrial Revolution, and it only existed until industrial society reached a point where they could realize that they could exploit women as labor capital too. Which in early industrial society wasn't the case because early industrial society was considered too physically grueling, too harsh, and too demanding for women.
yeah.
You sound kind of like Marx talking about the family under the bourgeois system. I'm gonna be honest with you.
I like some of the criticisms Marx makes about capitalism. I just don't like his solution to the problem.
It's because he
I
misunderstands
feel-
Hegel.
Yeah, I feel that he goes the complete wrong direction. Like Marx's problem is he thinks that capitalism has ruined everything that was good about the world, so we should just burn it all down anyways. I say no. That means capitalism wins. That means industrial society wins. The goal is not to submit to industrial society. The goal is to curtail the industrial society in order to fix the world. I'm very much a crisis of modernity kind of person where I feel that the humanities need help catching up to how we've developed scientifically. Whereas Marx wants to surrender to science at the sacrifice of the humanities, I feel we need to help the humanities catch up.
I wouldn't say that Marx wants to surrender to science, mostly just because of how much of Marxism is based in like Hegelian idealism.
Well, I guess I should say Marx wants to surrender to materialism. I don't want to do that.
Here's the thing: Marx is like a half-hearted materialist because, again, his basis in Hegel shows like this is actually Bataille's critique of Marxism, where Marxism is still an idealistic, non-materialist ideology, and it fails to fully conceive of itself because it relies on a sense of history.
Well, I also like this interesting idea, this sort of pseudo joke that Marx is the fourth Abrahamic religion. I don't know if you've ever heard this before. But how Marxism and its dogmatism and how the dogmatic nature of Marxist socialism almost makes it a religious cult in the sense that follows Abrahamic principles where the idea that the ideology in itself is the one true God and you won't have any other religion beside it.
Kind of true, but like I wouldn't put it. I would just say call it a what's the word? Millenarian religion.
Religious, maybe.
It's a secular theology.
It's like a religion, but it doesn't believe in like a higher power in a way.
Well, it's like it believes in a higher power, and that higher power is the idea of a sense of history. It relies off of dialectical materialism to rationalize its theology. It's the idea of historical progress where A becomes B, becomes C, becomes D,
Right.
without any real acknowledgement of other classes. It's why the focus on class conflict also oftentimes just feels a little nonsensical, where it's like Marx doesn't know what to do with Asia, so he just writes it off as the Oriental mode of production because it doesn't fit inside that like theological, ideological worldview of history.
You know, it seems weird that oftentimes on this podcast we end up talking more about communism than we do actually about monarchism.
I don't know.
We got shit.
I guess that's the problem when you have two very economically left-wing people as the main host.
Here's the thing, though. Marx is interesting and valuable because, like, what more can you say on monarchy other than we want it? How do you implement it, etc.? Other than like you end up repeating yourself or getting into the minutia of dynastic politics compared to economics, which is always dynamic. There's always something to say about the economy on how to resolve it. Like it could be Marxist, it could be technocratic,
and
it could be whatever.
Economics is very open-ended. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer for economics because with economics you kind of judge the I always said it like this: economics is trying to mathematically quantify human behavior, and since human beings are inherently irrational and what's the word I'm looking for?
Erratic
And contradictory, there is no true way to objectively explain or predict economics.
I'll have you know, my favorite philosopher has the pee-pee poo-poo answers on how humans act inside of a market. So, you're wrong, I'm right, I'm gonna get you with hammers.
What does that even mean?
The get you with hammers part?
Any of that.
My guy right, your opinion wrong, you're fake, you're an idealist, read Marx, read Hegel, read Auschwitz or The Great Alibi, Lamau.
Alright, there is someone in the audience who wants to come up, Plongo and then Americanus. I have to take people one at a time because we won't have any more than 5 people up here on the stage at a time. So
Reed
Plongo, I'll
Schlegel?
start with you, and then we'll go on to Americanus if Americanus wants to come up. For those of you who are not speaking, I will ask you to mute your microphone to give Plongo the stage. And then once Plongo is done, we will open to respond. Understood? Without further ado, Plongo, come on up.
Hey guys, how is everyone today?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I did join a little bit, not a little bit, very extremely late. So what's the topic for today, guys?
There isn't really a specific topic for today. We're kind of just talking and seeing where the conversation takes us.
All right.
Yeah, we're yapping.
Yeah. So there's a bad thing I don't like a lot. It's Project 2025. I'm sure if you guys have heard it.
I don't know if I have.
It's
So Project 20.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. You explain it, please.
It's basically like the Republican plan for changing the U.S. government to ensure their
that's
power.
Project 2025.
Yeah, so it would eradicate a lot of things. It would change the healthcare system. And let's just say the healthcare system would completely get fucked over. They would change the education system.
Now,
I noticed Frederick did a little cheer there.
Plongo, I would have to ask for future reference, keep swearing to a minimum. If it slips out,
my fault, OG. Anyway,
yeah, you're fine. You're fine. If it slips out, it's cool. Just don't come up here talking like a sailor. Just for sake of quality control, I just want to point that out.
Education would change a lot as well.
Woke.
There's also a whole thing about like changing a lot of the government workers to contract workers, because that's also a good way to maintain ideological purity.
And they would also basically, they would just try to eradicate the liberal values, and they're also planning to like get rid of abortion completely. So preventers like Plan B, they would get rid of that.
Isn't there also a whole debate about removing condoms as well? That's starting to come up.
Yeah. We can't go that far. That's just too far.
It's the natural like inclination of it. Once you start going like, you can discourage abortion, but if you ban it, then you're gonna end up banning Plan B. It's like also the whole weird thing with Republicans and child marriage.
Yeah.
It's that time where the slippery slope fallacy stops really being a fallacy.
Yeah,
I hate the fact that they call it the slippery slope fallacy, because the entirety of my life, I have never seen it actually not be a fallacy.
It's like the other concern is like this thing, like especially with the contractor work, it would just heavily undermine the American nation state and its ability to actually govern. It also.
I do want to say, Plongo, while I appreciate your concern and I share your concern, as I hate the idea of the possibility of there being a one-party dictatorship in America, but I haven't heard or seen any major Republican leaders, including Donald Trump himself, talk about or endorse the idea of Project 2025.
No, so they have. There's plenty of like the Trump and multiple Republicans who are running for presidential state. They are endorsing it a lot.
There has been direct endorsements. Like I've seen some of it as well. Like a lot of it was cooked up by like super PACs and think tanks. This is more on the think tank end of it. It's something that you don't always explicitly say. It's also it's very similar to just like the advisor, who was the white nationalist advisor for Trump, the one that ran Breitbart, great replacement guy.
I don't remember his name. Wasn't it Steve Bannon?
Yeah, it was Steve Bannon. Like, there's like a whole bunch of stuff with him where he wouldn't say the quiet part loud, or well, Trump wouldn't, but he would say like that loud part.
But I don't think we. While I hate to be the person who would eat my words, but I don't think we need to be as worried about it as we are. but I'll be the first to say if it does come to fruition, I'll be the first in line to stand against it. On the simple grounds that no political party should have that much power and unquestionable authority over American politics.
My take is that like as soon as the Republicans try to get some loyalists in the military will just overthrow the government at that point. We'll be in just like this really terrible like mid-military dictatorship.
I think at that point we might have a De Gaulle kind of situation where the military overthrows the republic, sort of reset it.
It would definitely be that, but or it'd be more like in Turkey where the military would step in whenever one of the like non-Kemalist parties would start gaining power and trying to undermine the stake of the republic.
I'm noticing that Frederick would like to speak, and we've been going over him, and I've been noticing he's trying to talk a little bit. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Frederick. Go ahead, Frederick.
Yeah, so... Okay, I forgot what I was trying to say. Damn it.
Happens to the best of us.
We'll give you a minute.
Yeah, go ahead. A minute.
Was it? Oh yeah, I remember now. So a lot of conservatives in America want to increase the power because it used to be conservatives were like, nope, we don't want the federal government to, but now it's like, let's increase the power of the federal government,
Well, that seems to be a general trend with... I'm sorry, Frederick, were you done, or did you still have something to say? I'll take that as you finish your thought. But what I was going to say is, I think that has to do with the switch from conservatism, from a neoliberal conservatism, or to a more populist conservatism.
Oh yeah.
Where as populists tend to be very big on centralizing power around their authorities and around their figures, because that allows them to more properly control the the word I'm looking for? The popular narrative.
Yeah, it's all about narrative control, but also like since populism oftentimes relies on individual leaders to maintain its fervor, like it becomes inherently unstable. So you want to cement in power those who have power, like, or who have the popularity. It's like one of the things that I'm consistently curious about is like Trump's getting up there in age. Let's just say if like Trump keels over, it doesn't matter who wins, Trump or Biden. If Trump keels over, I wonder what's going to happen to the populist movement, because I don't think anyone can wear Trump shoes.
Yeah, like everybody's gonna succeed Trump if because this will be his last term.
Well, he wanted to run for a third term. He was bringing that up. Like,
which
if he won, it's unconstitutional.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm all for abolishing term limits on the presidency, because I think it's BS that we got rid of we put term limits on presidency in the first place, just because we got afraid that we'd get another president like FDR, who was super good at his job, and God forbid a president be super good at his job and keep getting elected.
Along with the eternal president FDR, he is my king, and he lives in my heart every day.
Hey,
every man a king.
How about some William Howard Taft, guys? Get stuck in a bathtub.
I'm more a Teddy Roosevelt person.
Yeah.
I
like that man, kind of.
I think Teddy went a little too far with the eugenics stuff. I'm just gonna be honest there. Like,
yeah, but that was kind of a product of its time.
Yeah, but I'm still gonna hold him a little accountable for it.
Right.
About integration, because
was Teddy for integration? I didn't not know Teddy's stances on that problem.
Yeah,
better than Woodrow Wilson, at least.
Which is the English language in one flag, which is the American flag. So essentially, saying like you should cut all ties with like your former country to be a part of this like other country.
Which is
okay.
As a Eagle Scout myself, I just love the fact that Teddy Roosevelt basically embodies the idea of a primordial Boy Scout president. I love it.
Oh, Plongo, do you have anything else to add or say? Because there are also a couple other people requesting the floor.
No.
All right, we're going to bump you back down for coming up. Americanus, you are next. Come on up, bud.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
Howdy,
Not much. How you
howdy.
doing?
Hello there.
You hear us
I
okay?
was thinking about what I was gonna say, but I'm not sure. But I think Project 25, like the Republican takeover, I feel like it's pretty much just fear mongering or like propaganda. It's like a very elaborate type of like propaganda because most of that stuff is like really unrealistic that I've read about it.
Right.
It's like the ideal situation sort of thing, it feels like.
Right, and of
Really.
course, if we really want to wonder if we have to be concerned about it or not, we should go back to 2016 and think about how much of all of the rhetoric Trump brought to his election in 2016 did he actually fulfill.
Yeah, he never built the wall or anything.
Yeah,
Basically,
but
he
I think
actually
he said that.
everybody's like, oh no.
so
Yeah.
yeah, I do get what you're saying that it might just be all talk and then no actual show because they'll be too busy prancing around about how they got into power more than.
Alright, everybody talked about how Trump is gonna drain the swamp, but he wasn't really doing much. But then Q came along and was like, hey, here's this and that.
Here's the thing with the QAnon stuff. That was just like a Channer conspiracy hole. Like when you start going to poll for your predictions, then that's just a sign that you should like reconsider all your life choices. Like
There
all of
is
Yeah.
There-
I think Trump. Yeah, I think he's probably gonna lose. I feel like he's doing things.
That Q was the military or this and that. Yeah.
when it was just some dude who's posting on poll because it's anonymous, so you can just make up whatever the hell you want on 4chan. Like one thing though with 2025 worth mentioning is Schedule F, which is Trump's plan basically to remove a lot of the protections that the civil service has, like politics wise and just generally, and also the upping on contractors, which again is a way to ensure more loyalty. Imagine all like the power tripping mall cops and security guards now entering government because of stuff like that. Like that's what we're like looking forward to with a Trump presidency, which is like any other policies of Trump, if you like him, if you hate him, or whatever, immediately becomes irredeemable when you start replacing the civil servants with Paul Blart.
Yeah.
But there's
few things about it. The abortion parts about it and the birth control stuff.
The abortion parts about it and the birth control parts about it are not going to apply to the people who are in the upper echelons of society. It's just like how a bunch of rich Republicans started crossing borders to get their mistresses to have abortions. Like they are not moral people. They only use morality as a way to appeal to the mass demographic. And it's like, why would you ever practice what you preach when what you preach is just there to buy a vote or sell a product? It's why right-wing grifting is also everywhere.
And that's why if I ever get into politics, the first thing I will do as someone who's culturally very right-wing and socially supports a lot of right-wing stances is I'm going to call out a whole bunch of grifting.
Like, grifting is just kind of it's a symptom of what our politics has become because it's all about selling an ideology, being able to identify with that ideology on an aesthetic basis. It's also about beauty politics where people just prefer something that's aesthetically appealing compared to something that actually functions.
The issue with politics today is politics is inherently consumerist rather than intellectual today, where it's not about critical thinking or philosophy or actually having ideas. It's just about selling a premise.
Well, I actually want to get into politics, but I'm not sure how to go about it. But I think because I've been trying to think of like a career that I want to do for a long time, and I think politics is actually pretty interesting to make like a career out of. But I'm not sure how to go about it.
A lot of it with political careers is that you just have to kiss ass to local chapters until they select you for candidacy. Like that's all it is.
It seems fairly easy, like a fairly easy way to make. And then I I saw this thing that really like inspired me to get in politics about Trump. This was like after he was convicted of like 34 charges, and like I think like the next day or something, he like raised a GoFundMe or something, and like within one day he raised like $50 million of people literally just sending him money, and I was like, shit, that's what I need to be doing. That's the career that that's insane.
Yeah,
Of course.
Frederick wanted to say something. Frederick, go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Also, the media can't really be trusted anymore.
Well, the media could never be trusted. We've had the yellow press since like what, the Spanish-American War. Like the whole purpose of a lot of capitalist liberal bourgeois society is consumers. It's not even consumption, it's consumerism, because I'd say consumption, you at least gain value from it. Consumerism is more just like empty calories for the mind. And it's also been like that even a bit beforehand, but people just didn't have not like the ability, like with literacy rates going up, like people were able to consume more schlop because there's always been a yellow press. There's always been that sort of fiction that's kind of been spread around by mass media that was available around whatever time.
Yeah, they say trust us. We're telling the truth type stuff, but they're not really. They're just like pushing a narrative.
Everyone pushes a narrative, though. Like, everyone kind of lies and everyone pushes a narrative because everyone identifies with narratives. That tends to be human nature, is to create some sense of history, some sense of self, and then you push that narrative and identity, even if it doesn't match up with any materialist facts.
But,
nowadays, it's like, the trendy thing. Just,
It's always been the trendy thing.
But since we mentioned QAnon earlier, I wanted to bring up a funny anecdote. There's this dude at work whose name I forget, but I call him the walking QAnon billboard because he always wears like these really QAnon-esque themed t-shirts where he talks about things like the vaccines being evil and how the Democrats are the real virus and the media's like it seems like it comprises his entire wardrobe, and he always wears it to work.
Okay,
I can grab the vaccines. Like, when can we ever really trust science?
I mean, I never got vaccinated.
Ever since it like eliminated smallpox.
I was not letting them poke me for a fake vaccination. Now you don't even need the vaccine.
And all, they're like paying scientists on that to like say what they want.
Oh, that's been the case. Like, okay, the whole thing about like a full meal of breakfast, like being bacon and eggs and like some other stuff on the side, was literally just paid off. Like, that's been something that Edward Bernays took pride in making up. Like, we've always been under the influence of money because money trumps all in a capitalist bourgeois society.
We live in a capitalist society, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
like money is like the single most important thing, at least especially like in the United States. Like, I think there was like a time where like your family name or who your father was kind of mattered, but like after like the 1920s and like the 1960s, I think the only thing that matters is really how much money you make.
Yeah, it's because we live, like, it's the object of desire. It's something that we are kind of programmed by the ideological system that we are raised in to desire above all else. Like, in earlier systems, that object of desire was something completely different, but it's hard for us to even conceive of that because we don't have that context and that upbringing. It's also why we struggle to think of something beyond liberal capitalism. It's like the whole Mark Fisher quote, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism because we're so immersed in it.
Well, Americanus, do you have anything else you would like to add? Because there's someone else who would like to come up on stage or any final
it's
thoughts?
fine. Phantom Stalker, you can talk. Thanks, guys, for letting me talk.
All right.
Have a good one.
Thank you for coming up. We appreciate your involvement. God bless.
Oh yeah. Also, another topic from Project 2025. They said they wanted to get rid of liberal stuff.
Well,
what does that mean?
Liberal? If we really want to go into it, the Republicans are liberals too.
Yeah, they're the truest liberals.
They say they
abolish both the Democrats and the Republicans. Find the Necronomicon. Let's get the circle ready. Let's bring George Washington back to the dead. Throw a crown at the reanimated corpse and say, "You're not getting out of it this time."
I'll invite Phantom Striker up.
Man.
Yes. Phantom Stalker, come on up.
Hello.
Hello there. Thank you very much for letting me speak. Thank you very much for giving me the time. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
So I would just like to bring out us just one thing. For one, I am not an intellectual by any means, so I apologize if I sound very simplistic in my wording.
Mhm.
I am not an engineer. I am not anything of the upper echelons of education, but I am someone who does have their concerns and their possible solutions as to what we can do to advance, the movement of, say, monarchism. Because I know the intent of this organization or group, however you want to call it, is that it wants to normalize the idea of monarchism and possibly advance it further from there. I understand that. However, it's just that me and another individual, who I will not say for anonymity's sake, we're trying our best to see what we can do in order to advance that ideology or philosophy, more specifically, into the masses of the United States. Because here's the thing: as you would see, and I would see, that currently we as a nation are hyper polarized, and the thing is the whole idea of American nationalism doesn't really exist, because due to the fact that we have many different ethnicities with different viewpoints and how to live their lives, it's hard to pinpoint how to actually have a unified identity in and of itself. So, when you're talking about nationalism, like American nationalism, American identity, I'm like, well, that depends on who you're talking to. The Southern Baptists will say, oh, we're the true Americans. The Midwesterner would say, no, we're the true Americans. The Western part of the United States would say, no, we're the real Americans. Or, with me being Hispanic, because we've been here for a while, with the colonization of Spain and such, we could say, oh, we're the real Americans. It's this constant, back and forth, and it's just very,
Of course.
it's just very horribly dividing. And because of the current political system that we have, that is a two-party system that has changed over time, and with, in my opinion, parties themselves divide nations, divide societies, because of how you have factionalism and all that going on. I would say that if I don't think, as you were, I can't remember. Oh, what was it? Who brought up 2025 again? The project again?
Plongo initially brought it up.
Okay, so as Plongo brought that up, I would say that, yeah, it's not healthy to have a one-party control of the nation, where you have an agenda that may not be so, But here's the thing: I do consider myself a traditionalist. I do consider myself as someone who does support the family unit, the nuclear family, and I want to help, the current demographic crisis that we have, which is every other nation has, unfortunately, a birth rate problem. And, and I would like to see where more native-born Americans are, bringing up or are being brought up, and they're, being educated and brought up into a society that values life and such. However, I do understand the flaws of banning certain things, because, for example, if you try to ban guns, people will just use
Black markets.
black markets or whatever, or especially with the. I'm sorry, what was that?
No, you cut out real bad.
I said that they will grab anything, like knives.
The same goes with abortion, marijuana, literally anything. As soon as you ban it, you create a black market for it, especially with how capitalism tends to encourage going about illegal methods, as long as it gives a suitable enough profit for what time you might do.
Oh, yeah, they also say guns will reduce crime. Well, criminals aren't going to follow the law. They're going to do it illegally.
I think a lot of it is a lock keeps an honest man honest with that logic, where it's there's a lock on the door, you're not going to break it and steal something, or there's a lock on that bike, you're not going to yoink it, but if there wasn't a lock, you might yoink it, where and also like, but the logic's a little iffy. But when it comes down, what were you going to say, Phantom Stalker? You're talking about promoting monarchism, then getting into the ethnic divides of it. One thing I actually wanted to mention with your American nationalism point, there is a unifier, which is the American civil religion, which is something that we're not really conscious of, but there is the bones of some unifying, almost pseudo-theological, pseudo-ideological structure that keeps America bound together. It's why we haven't really turned into a bloodbath with a large amount of terrorism. Most of the time, terrorism that happens in the United States, especially domestic terrorism, comes from very specifically ideological perspectives compared to cultural perspectives, where you have like far right groups like Atomwaffen Division, the Ku Klux Klan, far left groups like Weather Underground, the Symbionese Liberation Army, where they only really act based off of ideology in reaction to liberalism and the liberal bourgeois system, compared to the divides there. The ideologies might fit those divides, but there's also a lot of bleed over, which allows there to be some semblance of nationalism, but it's also hard to find American nationalism because America's gone through so many shifts that our idea and identity as a nation state has kind of shifted. And also the fact that the nation state has been fairly incompetent ever since, I'm going to say 2008, whenever it started ceding its own power over to capital and private interests, that people aren't able to be proud of the system anymore or have like a sense of safety with the system.
And that's what I am kind of banking on. I don't want to sound like an opportunist, however, because the thing is...
No, be an opportunist. Being an opportunist is good. You want to act opportunistically in politics. That's how politics works. There's no shame in it.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, like, I don't want to be someone that is considered on the wrong side of history, because this is what I'm trying to do here. What I want to do is, along with this individual that I'm working with at the moment, is that because of the divides that we have right now and the abuses of power that we have with this foul republic that we have, because it is a false republic. Because here's the thing, the thing is. And I've brought this up before with my friend who actually has a degree in constitutional law. I told him and I asked him, do you really think it is actually democratic when you have one party controlling the entire state once the other party has become a minority? Is that really democratic? And he said no. I'm like, okay, so you see the problem here. So that's the thing. It's like, we truly do not have a democratic society, because the thing is if you really had an actual society based upon, shared interests and so on and so forth, you would have like similar systems like parliamentary systems where you have multi-party control in coalition governments, where you have like certain groups that have similar ideas, but they are working together to get to that goal. Now, even with that, like if you want to go even deeper, that's just one faction of the political spectrum that's having control over a nation. And even then, that's not even democratic if you think about it. So what I want to do is, because of how people are losing this faith in this system that we have, or in this like this supposed American identity that we have, as you were pointing it out, like it's not necessarily out there. It's not necessarily promoted as often as it would be. However, I would say that because of how you have a horribly divided nation that we have right now, because of multiple different factors, but specifically that of like government management and such, what we're trying to do is, at first, we're trying to gather people who are not necessarily partisan. In other words, for people who are either they consider themselves independents, or those who are just sick and tired of the system in general, and specifically like traditionalist movements who are not necessarily all in with the whole conservative movement, or just having the term conservative be placed upon them. What we're trying to do is we're trying to tap into that disenfranchisement and have them understand that, having these weak or tyrannical parties are not the way to go. Okay? In order to have an actual stable society, it's not going to be with parties. It's not going to be with partisan politics. It's not going to be with that whatsoever. The only way you actually have a stable society is if you have one specific leader that is not beholden to anyone whatsoever but to the people themselves. And you can't do that through elections, because anytime when you try to get an independent or even a third party candidate in the United States, specifically when it comes to the presidential elections, it doesn't work. Okay, I mean that's just the reality of it. We are a two-party system through and through. There's no way you can break through to such a thing. And so, because of that, what we're trying to do is we want to install the idea that having a monarch of sorts, however they may be, is better than what we have right now. Because again, you have these politicians that are easily swayed by lobbyists who essentially want to get their favor. And because of that, it's just going to be the same rolling, what was it called? Not rolling, what's it called? Rolling door? No, revolving door of corruption. It's a revolving door of corruption, a revolving door of self-interests. There is no common good for the people whatsoever if all you do is have a leader that may have political affiliation, but if they're still a politician at heart, they still will be swayed one way or another to make it look like they're a unifying figure, but they're not.
Phantom,
So,
Phantom, if I may.
yes.
You sell yourself short. You said you're not an intellectual, my friend. You sell yourself much shorter than you actually are.
I mean, I never had a college education, so I don't know how I would exactly be like an intellectual of sorts.
Hey, I went to trade school. Technically, I don't have a college degree either. You don't need it. Being an intellectual is more about a state of mind than formal education. And I truly believe you have that state of mind.
One thing I want to mention with what you're saying is like you're already on the right track though with reaching out to the apolitical. Like a lot of it though is that like when it comes down to the American system it was never built to be democratic. It was always meant to be faux democratic. We've always had existing corruption, especially in our elections. Like we used to have political machines being like the guiding factor in how we chose people up until like the 1970s. We always had the backdoor authoritarianism to make the system kind of work. Like, and the thing is, selling someone on a monarchy, like you're doing the right moves there again, reaching out to the apolitical and just talking to them. A lot of it's also about engaging with your local community. So it also doesn't seem like you're an interloper just coming from the outside trying to push an ideology, which is the biggest failure, I think, of most fringe or out there political movements is that they don't really get a connection to that community. It's like why Patriot Front always looks so fucking stupid is because they are just waddling out there, putting up their little stickers, and then disappearing with no real connection. Same goes with a lot of the communist guys. Like I remember this video way back in the day, not even way back, like a couple months ago. Actually, now that I think about it, of this like just little dweeb like reading from newspapers, trying to pretend to be the next Lenin, holding them up, being like, "Look at this, though, proletariat is oppressed," and he looks like a yuppie. Like you gotta like one thing I would hammer home with you is just like reaching out to that local community. Start showing up to city council meetings and like talking to people there. They might be politicized at that city council meeting, but it at least gets people aware of your presence, and you're also able to talk to people that are in your existing community that have connections to that community that care enough to go to the city council, because local politics is one of the strongest places to actually show your ideas and beliefs and actually cause some level of reform.
And that's why as MOA, we encourage monarchists to, and the eventual formation of a monarchist party, we say we want to prioritize local governments first, because in my opinion, and the opinion of many people in MOA's leadership, is the problem with third parties in America is they always go for the most prestigious of offices. You always hear about the Libertarians or the Greens running for president or running for Congress. You never hear about them running for like city council or governor or their state legislator, and they need to run to these things in order to build the reputation and build the prestige for the parties in order to win those higher offices.
And the thing is, when they even run for local elections, they don't put in all the effort. They always focus on the federal elections. Like, I have a friend who was like, I think during their election, they were still heavily associated with the Green Party, and they would have been one of the youngest trans people elected to like a school board position, which would have been good PR for the Green Party, for the demographic that they try to reach. No effort put into like that election, no resources put in it. They prioritized a state Senate campaign of a guy who did not have enough of a base to actually win in that election in North Carolina. Like it just is insane to me how the Green Party operates, and they're still in debt from the 2016 election. too. Like I'm like in all these third parties again with that focus on either governor or president, especially in the executive parts of the government. Like they always fail because they also haven't shown that they can govern. They don't have mayors that they can show they govern. They might at most have people who exist on water boards or city council seats, barely ever city council seats. Oftentimes, like those nonpartisan elections that no one really cares about, so they just vote for anyone.
Right.
And that's another thing also. If you want to start engaging with politics and also gain some level of legitimacy, is run for those not like basically non-positions, like city commissioners that are there for like the treasury or whatever, like judges, which tend to be nonpartisan elections, or any of the weird just positions your city might have.
Like, I plan on running for city councilor at large within the next few years because it doesn't require that you be in a specific district. And it's usually just randos from the community who are business owners and such anyway.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, the thing is I'm also thinking about possibly, and again, because I don't have formal education, I'm only doing this out of like the grace of God here. What I want to do is in order to spread this idea, or at least the critiques of republicanism that we don't really usually have at all. In fact, what I want to do is I want to write a book alongside with this individual that I'm working with, so that way we create a system of like sort of like not persuasion, but more like just epiphany, where like, okay, this is what we have in our society, and this is how it's been dividing us for many, many years. And so why is it that we're continuing this self-division of like partisan politics and so on and so forth? And I just want to, have something that people can chew on and say, okay, maybe this guy has a point. Why are we continuing this self-destructive path that we have today? And when it comes to partisan politics, so that's what I want to do. It's basically more like a critique on just on Republican systems in general and the failures of how Republican systems have kept the peace or kept the stability in any way, shape, or form. That's what I want to do. So that way, where people who read this book in some way, shape, or form would read it and just have the gears turning, have the gears turning, have them mull about it for a little while. And then once they see how pointless it is to have the system that we have today, they're thinking, okay, well, let's put this into action. How do we do it? And then go from there. That's what I want to do. And so, go on.
I was just going to say, I recommend starting off with articles before you start on a book. Now, that's all I'm going to say with that, just so you can flush out all your ideas before trying to put them together in a book. And also you can build an audience for that book, because it's one thing to have a book and try to get people to read it. It's another thing to have like a 3-page, 4-page article that you want someone to read to slowly build up an audience and a following. So when you do publish the book, there's actually a group of people interested in what you have to say.
We suggest, Watercube and I both use Substack, and we suggest you give Substack a try. It'll really help with that.
Yeah, because it puts it somewhere online. You don't need to host it yourself. It's a lot easier to do. Excuse me for a second, though. I need to go let out my dog.
All right.
Okay. So, and not only that, but like we're also going to have an outreach towards the veterans who have been, who have served our country and such, because what we want to do is we want to have to build a foundation in which where military veterans who have felt like they have been abused and they feel like they have been wronged by the very politicians that they've served, basically because, you've had like these globalist politicians ever since the time of the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and so on and so forth. Specifically more Vietnam, but like Vietnam and onward, where you have these veterans who have been abused and who have been like tossed aside and all that. What we want to do is we want to reach out to these people who feel like, hey, I've served my country. I got nothing back from it. Why should I be patriotic about it? And I'm like, well, you shouldn't be. But what you should do is like we should essentially promote a system that, encourages, the sustainability of the nation itself first, more so than just going on constant globalist crusades that will achieve nothing in the end. So we're also wanting to do veteran outreach, so that way they themselves understand that, with the current system that we have, more and more of their generations of soldiers, specifically, like say their grandchildren or their children in general, will just be used as pawns in globalist crusades. We want to essentially create a sphere where they can trust us to know that, hey, we don't want you to have your children be sent off to war so needlessly and so horribly. And from there we go on to essentially have a influence where veterans and outside of the military, and possibly influence certain members in the military to understand that this system that we have is not going to be good for them, because again, it's all self-interest, it's all globalist interests that they have, or you have Republicans and Democrats on the same ticket, the uniparty essentially, that has brought upon great suffering for veterans because of their massive ugly crusades. For example, like Vietnam, we had a Democrat leading that. Later on, we had the war on terror led by Republican and then continued by Democrat. Okay, so the two parties who have made these massive globalist crusades to essentially try to create like this foul American hegemony that is slowly rotting away as we speak, because now it's more like China becoming more of the massive global hegemony in the world. And with that being said, I would say that if you get people who have served and understood that their sacrifice was just considered as like a joke to the political class, to the ruling class of today, then having that influence being brought upon them, as well as like having their children who may be soldiers themselves currently, will understand that I don't want to serve in this system. I don't want to serve in this joke of a system that will get me killed only because we want to look good on the global stage, or we want to look powerful on the global stage. That to me is an unsustainable model of governance. You cannot be an empire. What was the phrase that was used? I think it was Ron Paul who used it. You cannot be a nation at home and an empire abroad. So that's the thing. I do subscribe to that philosophy, and I would rather have our nation be protected at home rather than just having our resources, our blood and treasure being squandered, globally speaking. Now, how we're going to get to that point, we're still working at the kinks in that, but I think the best thing what I can do in my situation is that I could talk to veterans who recently got back from service, who feel disserviced, who feel like they've been abandoned and such, and I would talk to them and have a conversation going to where we could come at a consensus that you and I don't like the system because it feels like it's just been abusing us for far too long. And from there, we create a movement little by little by little to where you have people who are on the same page. Now, again, this is going to take a while, and this may take a few years down the road or many years. I don't know. But I do want to create this atmosphere that, opportunistic Republicans, opportunistic Democrats are, going to just screw you over in the end. And I'd rather have, this unifying leader, that being a monarch of sorts, to essentially make it to where they have a better interest in helping you more so than the partisan morons that we have today in Congress.
One thing I wanted to mention specifically with the American hegemony, there has been benefit to American hegemony, what we were talking about earlier. We're now the global reserve currency. We're able to, the splendor that has become middle-class America was a byproduct of that hegemony, because we were able to import a lot of goods in raw resources for fairly cheap. All the comforts that we've gotten used to and how we've been able to define ourselves as American are byproducts of that. The veterans, they're treated horribly, but most veterans in most societies have been heavily mistreated. That's been one of the major consistencies throughout human society, is after the war's over, we tend to stop giving a shit about those who fought in those wars. And it is alienating and it is terrible, but it's something that's been something we've never been able to resolve because we struggle with that. And with the quote about a nation at home and an empire abroad, for the most part, America is an empire at home. How the United States and like the governments, especially local governments, interact with their local population. Like our police is heavily militarized. They more act like occupational forces in inner cities compared to, a police force there to watch out for the interests of the people there. It just become the nature of the police. Like, I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but I don't think a cop should be driving an MRAP around. Like, I'm just saying.
Looks cool.
One, it's a terrible vehicle. Two, it's like just a sign of like kind of how the police interact with the community. Like, for example, Portland. I think it's Portland. Portland's police community, it was that or another Oregon city, mostly lives in the suburbs in Washington compared to in the city itself. They are removed from the community, so they only go in as an occupying force, which comes down to the geographic and class divides that come from the suburbs and urban living, and how the suburbs have undermined both the rural regions and the cities as like places where people can actually culturally interact and interface with each other, causing more conflict.
Something I wrote about in
Yeah.
an article I published on my Substack, which you read, Waterkeep. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it was a good article.
So, all right then. Okay. If that is the case, then I would say that if it is an empire at home, because of how police are and how this and that are interconnected with one another, then at the very least I would rather have an imperial system where it actually serves the interests of the people rather than just like have an occupying force. Because again, if people feel like they are being used as a needless political capital, then I would rather not have that system put into place. But again, I'm trying to work this out. Believe me, I'm trying to work this out as much as I can. And I do not have any sort of like formal education in how to do this. And I'm a working class guy. I'm a part of the proletariat. Okay. I do not have any heavy capital at my disposal, which is why me and this individual, we're trying to find a benefactor for our cause in some way, shape, or form. So
What
that
do
we
you
get
do, fellow working man. What do you do for a living?
I'm a CNA. I work as a certified nursing assistant.
Oh, lovely healthcare. A very noble field.
I feel out of place as downwardly mobile petty bourgeois.
I'm
So
I'm trained in automation and robotics, but I work an assembly job at a factory. I'm horribly overqualified for what I do.
Is the pay good at least?
23.5, and I'm trying to become a team lead, which will give me a few more dollars on the hour.
That's not too bad.
Alrighty. But yeah.
About what I was trying to say for Waterkeep to interrupt me. The youth of this generation is kind of waking up to the realities that we're not serving the interests of like freedom, right? But instead, just serving like the bourgeois, all this type of shit,
That awakening's been around since around the 1970s.
Numbers, lowest recruitment numbers to date.
Well, the low recruitment numbers come from the fact that we've changed the necessary qualifications to get into the military. It's harder to get into the military now than it was during the Iraq War because they would take anyone. They would ignore ADHD, they would ignore autism, they'd ignore all of it and just grab you and throw you on the front line because they did not care.
Yeah, but now we have a volunteer force, and technically it's backfiring on them because the people have now waken up to the reality that, hey, we're not actually fighting for a cause, but we're just fighting for the interests of a few.
Well, like, you're assuming that a lot of people join the military out of patriotism or nationalism or anything of that sort, when oftentimes people either join it for the GI Bill, people join it for really any other reason than, like that actual nationalism. Like my dad, who got all the way up from second lieutenant to major general, like he had a nationalist streak with him, but he didn't join the military out of nationalism, more just interest with the military.
Yeah, but nowadays, it's like hey, what cause are we really fighting for? Because we're not fighting it for freedom, because we're going overseas to kill a bunch of poor farmers who probably are not a very, much of a national security threat. And not that the young generation, now I'm not saying every one of them, but a lot of them don't really want to go and fight anymore.
Well, it's because like oftentimes people who join the military nowadays, they're joining it for just the sheer economic or citizenship benefits that is joining the military, and that's been the case again since like around the 80s, 90s. Like it's been a place where if you were too poor to go to college and you didn't want to go to trade school, you go through the military because the military would get you the GI Bill so you could go to college and you could go to life. Like the whole purpose of the military is to send poor people to the slaughter on behalf of bourgeois interests. It's why we intervened like in a lot of these nations. Like the Iraq War, like the second Iraq War was just a inevitability. The first one was to defend our ally who, like the Kuwaitis, say what you will about them, but like most of our wars have been somewhat moral. We try to always rationalize wars via moral so we don't feel bad about doing these wars.
Say it was completely moral. Take a look
No.
for Iraq, for example. Went for the oil.
Well, like we went for the WMDs that we sold Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War.
The ones that ended up not being there.
Exactly.
But we technically knew he had them because we sold him mustard gas to fight the Iranians.
Not
We've
to rush this conversation because this is a really good conversation, but the hour is getting late and we should probably be wrapping up. So,
I do. Oh, I'm sorry.
we-
It's just I'm sorry.
What do you think? We didn't find anything because they just used all of them up, or is it just
They probably used all of them up because of how the trench warfare went in the Iran-Iraq War. That stuff was basically World War I tier tactics.
Although I did hear an interesting theory that they may have been moved over the Syrian border, and that's where Saddam got his chemical arsenal that he used against the Free Syrian Army.
That's interesting. I need to look into that. I wouldn't put it past. Oh, actually, no. It wouldn't really make sense with the relationship between Syria, like the Syrian Ba'ath and the Iraqi Ba'ath were basically also in a Cold War with each other because of the big ideological split between them. Because Saddam broke away from Saddam, and then the Neo-Baathists under the Assad dynasty took over, which completely removed Syrian and Syriac Ba'athism from Iraqi Ba'athism, which abandoned secularism in relation. Was it Shia or Sunni? I forget which religion Saddam was.
I think it was Shia.
It was like for like Shia chauvinism in relation to there, along with like I think that was the major split, was the abandonment of secularism and also the abandonment of like the corporatist economy that really defined the Ba'ath movement.
Yeah.
I would just like to add one last thing. I know it's getting late for you guys because I'm pretty sure you live in the East Coast, if I'm not mistaken. So I would just like to say that if I don't know if you guys saw this, I posted it on one of the server channels. That there was this poll conducted, and it was published by Newsweek, that 40% of Gen Z actually does favor. Well, now this is just one poll, and I don't know how true it is, but if there is some truth to it, then I would play off of that and try to get Gen Z to actually understand that, okay, maybe, yeah, what you're wanting is a good thing, just we got to play it in a different fashion. The thing is that what this poll conducted, and the question was would you rather have a leader that was not restrained by legislature or by the courts and actually was greater executive power, which basically the article of itself was Gen Z supports dictatorships or whatever. And 40% of them said yes, they would support that, while 27% said no.
And I would say part of this, and I'm saying this from a completely monarchist standpoint, is that we as Americans and we generally in the liberal democratic West tend to look at any sort of autocratic or authoritative government where it shies away from popular sovereignty as an inherent dictatorship, and even say a monarchy is a dictatorship. But there is a distinction between monarchy and dictatorship that is lost, and I feel like this is something we need to point out to these young people, and what they really need is a monarchy and not a dictatorship.
Yeah, like if you've seen Trump, the rise of Trump and all that, like the people want a king, they just don't know it yet.
Well, it's more this people, especially with how sluggish liberal bourgeois democracy tends to be. People want action more than anything else. It's not just like the Trump thing is not a wanting a monarch. They want someone who seems like they can just act and do something. Because like Trump is nowhere near a monarch. He doesn't have the dignity of it.
Right.
He's some huckster from New York.
But it isn't just actions, it's also results too.
Well, yeah, well, the results are less important. Action tends to be a lot more important, especially in the American mind, because we're short-minded. We don't really think on the long term, and the liberal bourgeois ideology does not encourage us to think on long term. That's why we had stuff like 2008 and Enron and all these economic problems, because we only think in terms of the next 5 years, the next 10 years at max, compared to what's going to look like 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line. And so we just want change. It's why a lot of like Trump's policies were kind of bad in practice. A lot of them were, even in theory, a lot of them were pretty bad. But we liked them anyway because it was something. He did something. It's why a lot of the younger Gen Z Dems are just frustrated with Biden, because Biden just seems to sit there. And even if the stuff he does do, he doesn't really show that he has done it. There's no propaganda supporting that, while Trump would publish everything.
And the only thing he's campaigning on is the abortion issue, not like the economy and all that stuff.
Which, like, either way, like, well, the thing is with the economy is that the government has had a huge failure with a saying like, oh, like we have like what? It's like 5-6% inflation right now, right? Somewhere in that range.
Wait, say that number again.
5 to 6. Oh, we have 3% inflation. Yeah, 3%. That's not bad. That's not bad.
What?
It was worse earlier in the year. It was much worse earlier in the year.
Yeah, and we've had a great improvement on it. Also, there's been a crackdown on basically the price gouging done by a lot of companies that used inflation as an excuse to price gouge, because that's what they're going to do to seek profit. And none of this is published or popularized because someone's either misleading Biden, like propaganda-wise, or they just don't realize that they need to actually show that they did something other than run on the like single issues of like abortion or whatever, which they've been running on since like 2016.
They're losing their support base with the young people who are technically how do I say it, pro-Palestine, that type of shit.
Well, the Palestine issue is also a major player in this, because when let's just say you're some young Gen Z Dem, or even like Gen Alphas that are starting to fucking get up there, like in their high school years, looking at politics, they just see a government that does nothing other than support a genocide, and that's not a good look, especially when you're trying to mobilize voters and you're trying to mobilize whatever other groups.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I would just like to end it on this point, that because of how you have a lot of youth that are disenfranchised by the government in of itself and would rather have a leader that actually does things without any restraint, I think we can work off of that and we could meet them not at the point where like, oh yeah, let's just have a dictatorship. Like, no, but rather more like establish the foundation of what an American monarchy would look like here in the States. How that would look like, I don't know. I mean, personally, because what Watercube just said, that we're basically an empire. Okay, well, let's have an imperial system of some kind. How would that look like? I don't know. But we can work out the kinks along the way, and from there we could establish an audience of people that really want this sort of system, but we need to get them to understand that a dictatorship is not necessarily the way to go, but to have an actual, a monarch of sorts to establish that power structure.
Right.
Phantom, I would like to invite you officially to committee and the ideological committee specifically because I feel like you would be a very powerful voice there, and that the committee is where we discuss a lot of stuff.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'll let the next person talk. So you all have a good one.
All right,
Yeah, see ya.
God bless.
How do I get out of here?
I'll send you down.
Oh, I disconnected him.
Oh, that's mean. You just kicked him out of chat.
I didn't mean to. I didn't know.
Back there.
Should we just like close up because it has been 2 hours?
Sorry,
Gener-
Phantom.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Phantom. I accidentally disconnected you instead of sending you back down, buddy. But like we're about to read. Like we started recording at 8, right?
Right, a little after 8, so
Yeah,
we're
like
going on the 2-hour mark. For the sake of my poor laptop being able to process this audio file, we gotta wrap it up.
yeah. Okay, sounds good.
All right, so any final thoughts for the evening,
Go to your local city council meetings.
Frederick?
Like, yeah, same thing, but also to like, spread the word and go around. Just like Christianity, like spread the gospel type stuff. But also the same with monarchy.
Start door knocking. Get some literature. Start door knocking.
Do what the Jehovah's Witness do. Go knock on the doors.
Here,
And,
it works a little bit. Like if you're not weird about it, like the Jehovah's Witnesses are, then you might get away with it. Because like they are just like again, Watchtower Society. That sounds evil. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I have a bunch of brochures left over from the March for Life that I've been
stuff.
You just start
I've been
tabling events,
saving-
William.
Yeah, I know. I'm saving them because Ohio has our local statewide March for Life rally in October. And I and Thomas, since Thomas goes to college here in Ohio, have been sort of passing around the idea of getting together in Columbus and attending that. It's not set in stone yet, but the idea is there, and I was going to take them down there and pass them out, try and help build local support.
Okay. Anything else?
There's not a lot of opportunities in my town because I kind of live in Podunk.
Yeah.
We always just start like hosting meetings and advertising them on Facebook to the local library for local MOA meetup and see who shows up.
That's a possibility. Yeah.
That's what the Green Party does. Like the Green Party chapter for my region would just like rent a library room, and regardless of who showed up, at least one person would show up to stay in the room and pray other people show up.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, without further ado, let's close it out. Get the closing prayer and so, without further ado, please bow your head. Sorry, I'm writing down timestamps. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Heavenly Father, protect us, guide us, and help us until we meet again. Help us to spread the word. Help Phantom with his quest on his end to spread monarchism. Help us to continue to grow and organize on our local levels and to spread the word of our movement. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you all for your patronage of MOA. We hope to see you next week. Same time, same place. If you're on YouTube, smack that subscribe button and share the podcast with your friends. If you're on any of our other broadcasting services, find us on social media, find us on our website, send us an email, get a hold of us, and we can help you figure out what you can do to help the movement. In the meantime, may God bless you. May God bless the United States of America. Thank you and good night.